so in love with you.
Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. So today we're going to talk about the Federal Reserve, or the chairman of the Federal Reserve potentially saying that they're going to increase interest rates or the federal discount or federal funds rate by 0.75% or 75 basis points. Now, everyone knows that right now we have historically high inflation, and that inflation needs to be combated. Now, as you guys probably remember, the Federal Reserve actually went back on a 50 basis point increase last month and only went up 25 basis points or 0.25%. And as you guys are probably starting to see, that slight increase in interest rate has had profound effects in the housing market. Essentially, interest rates actually surged almost a full 2%. And now I believe that essentially is showing how fragile and inflated the housing market actually is. Bottom line, because of COVID, lockdowns, stimulus, and cheap money. And essentially, everyone right now is sitting on a house of cards that is fixing to collapse. Now, the Federal Reserve has no choice but to raise interest rates because of the inflation. So if the Federal Reserve actually increases the rate by 75 basis points instead of 50 basis points, is that going to crash the housing market? Now, today, what we're going to do is dig into an article from Market Watch that is absolutely bonkers, and that is essentially going to go into this very thing. Now, the article is titled, "A Jumbo 75 Basis Point Rate Hike? Fed's Bullard Isn't Ruling It Out." And here's the thing, you guys, we actually really need higher interest rates because we do need to combat this outrageous inflation before it gets more and more out of control. And what I believe the biggest problem is that the rate hike should have actually taken place Q2 or Q3 of last year. I think the Federal Reserve is way too late to the party. And because they're late to the party and battling the inflation that we caused, that is actually going to create a more violent transition from inflation to less inflation, or from sellers to buyer market, because of the lag from the Federal Reserve. So essentially, in my opinion, they need to raise rates faster and higher because they waited too long. Now, remember, you guys, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a YouTuber. I'm an opinion sharer, but I am a realtor in Houston and a loan officer in Texas, and I've been doing real estate for about 2 decades. And if you guys could, please, for your friend, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and as always, comment, share your insights, share your experiences, because my channel and the videos that I am doing, a lot of it is based on my subscribers' comments. So you guys, please keep doing that. Now, let's get into the article right now. Okay, the article says, one of the Federal Reserve's earliest advocates for aggressive rate increases won't rule out a truly supersized rise, though he doesn't expect one is needed. When it comes to the size of rate increase, one greater than 50 basis points is not my base case. Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis President James Bullard said during a virtual appearance on Monday. But he noted the Fed has increased rates by more, and when it comes to a potential 75 basis point increase, he says, I wouldn't rule it out. And you guys, that goes in to testify on how bad inflation really is. The article continues. Bullard said he remains on board with an almost certain series of 0.5% point rate rises as the central bank presses forward with plans to help bring inflation, now at 40-year highs, under control by lifting the federal funds rate target to around 3.5% by year end. Now, you guys, although a 75 basis point at this point isn't expected, ask yourself, how many times have they been wrong? And how many times have they readjusted their predictions? Now, if inflation numbers come out as the weeks go on and the inflation is much worse than they anticipate, what other choice will they have but to raise the federal funds rate 75 basis points versus 50 basis points? Because remember, y'all, we have right now what is going on is an absolute tragedy, the Russia and Ukraine war. That is only going to make inflation more out of hand and more out of hand, which is always why I'm saying they should have raised the rates last year. But because they waited, Now, this is in my opinion, I think we need the 75 basis point increase coming in May. Now, if you guys can comment right now if you guys think that we should have a 75 basis point increase or if we should not have a 75 basis point increase. Comment right now. Now let's continue on with this article. Bullard is a voting member of the Rate Setting Federal Open Market Committee, which last month raised its overnight target rate range by 0.25% point to between 0.25 and 0.5%. The FOMC has penciled in more rate increases for this year. In his appearance Monday, Bullard said inflation is far too high for comfort, and so we have to move to get inflation under control, adding, not all hope is lost here. I think we're in a position where we can maintain credibility and get inflation lower. And you guys, look at all the flip-flopping, okay? Look at all the flip-flopping going on. Of course, inflation is out of control. There have been a ton of people saying inflation is absolutely out of control. And you guys, right now, it's at a 40-year high. But the reality is we are probably in a much worse situation that they are allowing us to believe. Inflation is probably much, much higher because the data is lagging and there may be people that are kind of hiding certain things. And not to mention, inflation is a lot of pressure is being put on inflation to actually go up because of the war in Ukraine and in Russia, which are huge exporters of oil and food. So we're going to get hit with oil, we're going to get hit with food, and things are going to be actually much more difficult for everyday home buyers or even renters just to live their life. And what all this is going to do in turn, you guys, 75 basis point increase, all of this inflation, it is going to continue to cripple demand, which is what we need. And to be honest with you, these people that are making offers on houses that are over asking price by hundreds of thousands of dollars, they need to stop. The rug needs to be pulled out from underneath these people again, in my opinion, because they are making huge mistakes. And by purchasing a home over appraisal value, they are actually starting out their home ownership negative equity. They are already trapped in their house, which is essentially what I've been warning you guys about. It is better to have a higher interest rate than overpay for a house, because if you overpay for a house, essentially you cannot sell. If you pay a high interest rate, essentially you can refinance, you could still make equity, and you could still sell. Those things don't happen in a negative equity situation. Now, I believe, in my opinion, the 75 basis point potential increase in May is definitely needed. And what will happen to the housing market? More violent and powerful transitions from a seller to a buyer's market. Now, although I don't like the pain. I don't like people being rug pulled. I don't like all this craziness. But again, they waited too long. The interest rate hikes should have happened sooner. They should have happened last year because we had stimulus, we had PPP, we had EIDL, we had so many things to help us get through COVID that it was not necessary to keep the low rates. And as a result of that low rates, inflation out of control, housing market out of control. Now, no choice but to rug pull. Now, if you guys can, this is going to essentially conclude this video. But again, it's in my opinion now, all of these signs, all of this writing on the wall means that waiting right now is the best thing, and that by waiting right now throughout 2022, we're going to have more inventory options. Okay, the rates may be higher, but the demand is getting destroyed. And not only is the demand going to be getting destroyed as we go into 2022, I believe the fear of missing out and that emotional craziness is actually going to shift to the sellers. And when all of those things happen, topped with the recession, that is when our housing market is going to pop. I'm not sure how much equity is going to go down because that depends on the city. Not all cities are equal. Some are going to lag behind, like in my area where I live in Texas. We're a high migration state, so I believe it's going to take longer for me to be able to buy a house at a reasonable deal than it will be for other people. But again, you guys, more and more information that we are actually in a worse situation than a lot of people are letting on to be. And I believe our housing market is actually a house in cards that is fixing to crumble. And I believe that the Federal Reserve acted too late. Now, if you guys can comment on what you think. Do you think the Federal Reserve acted too late? Do you think they're right on time? Do you think we're actually going to be in a cool down instead of a crash? Let me know your thoughts. Now, as always, guys, if you're out there wanting to invest in real estate, I wish you luck and I hope you win.